Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Sitting Down with Brian and George. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in to the first episode 2 weeks ago. As I said, 2 weeks ago, I had a really great time doing it. I had a lot more fun, even more fun than I thought I would. And I had a lot of great feedback. It seems like a lot of people enjoyed listening as well. A good friend of mine did point out that I didn't share where my podcast can be found. So I'm doing that now. I've been uploading it to Spreaker.com, so you can find it there. But I've linked it from there to other areas. It's currently on SoundCloud as well, so you can listen to it there. It shares to YouTube. My YouTube channel is Wheelchair Ninja Productions. You can find it there as well. And if you're on social media, I have a Facebook page, Sitting Down with Brian George, and on Twitter. My personal Twitter account is Halifax Ninja, but Sitting Down with Brian George now has its own Twitter account, and the account for that is Sittin' Down Pod. That's SITTIN Down Pod. So forget the G in sitting, just because your username can only be so long. So again, that's Sittin' Down Pod. You can find the link there as well. This morning, I set it up to share on Spotify as well as Apple Music. That will take a couple weeks to go through, so look for that in the coming weeks. It will be available on Spotify and Apple Music. It's Friday, February 14th. It's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, folks. I keep going back and forth on if I like Valentine's Day or not. Not really sure. I know it's all commercialized, and it really is just a made-up holiday just to sell cards and teddy bears and chocolates. But when I'm in a relationship during Valentine's Day, I do kind of like to go all out. I'm single this year for the first time in 6 years on Valentine's Day, so don't have a whole lot of plans. But for those who do, have a great Valentine's Day. Make sure you treat your partner right. One thing I've noticed when I've been out the last couple of weeks, especially as we got closer to Valentine's Day, is there's a lot of Valentine's Day cards and greetings available, but I don't see too many for those with accessibility issues. And I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody has started a business for this and I'm just not aware of it. But I think it would do a great job, especially in a city where there are a lot of people with accessibility issues. And I feel like it would be a great market for it if they had accessibility issues Valentine's cards. You could have ones that say, for example, "You make me weak in the legs. Your chair or mine? Will you be my caregiver? I see that you have tires. I have tires too." Anyone who's a fan of Beavis and Butthead Do America will get that one. "She's got legs. Don't know how to use them. Oh, you have a flat tire. Want me to pump it? She's just in it for the parking. Come on, we all know there's people out there who are like that. I use a wheelchair because I need help carrying it around." And finally, "I can't feel my legs when I'm with you, and I love it." I promise I won't sing again on this podcast. I'm kidding, I might. We'll see. So, with Valentine's Day, it got me thinking what would be great date ideas for those with accessibility issues. And just a couple of weeks ago, I went to the Oval in Halifax, on the Halifax Common. It's currently a rink. The Oval is turned into a rink in the winter. And they have sledges, so people with who use wheelchairs can skate. They're little, basically sleds. You sit in them, and you have they're little hockey sticks with sharpened ends, and you can propel yourself around the Oval. I've used one before. I was about 12 or 13, so it was quite a few years ago. And a friend of mine and I went there a couple weeks ago. She wanted to skate, also hadn't been skating for quite a few years. And I wasn't really feeling it simply because the sledge is very low to the ground. And they do have a lift there, which I didn't know until after the fact, that would help me get into it. But I just wasn't really feeling it that day, so I thought, well, you go ahead and skate, and there's beaver tails there, so I'll figure, I'll grab a snack, I'll grab a coffee. It wasn't that cold out. I was dressed for it, and I'll just kind of hang out. And when we got there, we noticed that there was a sign with all the rules and whatnot. And one of them said that if you have a stroller or you use a wheelchair, you can go on the ice. You simply need a helmet. Didn't know that was a thing. So I got myself a helmet and got on the ice. And I got to say, I had a really great time. And went around the oval a few times. It's a nice little track, and there's a slow lane and a fast lane. I tried the fast lane once, and I tell you, 4 wheels on ice, you can really boogie. So if there's any wheelchair users here in Halifax or Dartmouth who want to get on the ice, head on over to the oval. It is a really great time. I really enjoyed myself. Another thing I really enjoy doing is heading to public gardens here in Halifax. The terrain isn't that great depending on your mobility, but personally I can get through it. But it's a really nice park, really spacious, really wide open. And at least for me, that's a big thing, is space. I've been to certain areas in the city, coffee shops and things like that, where there just isn't enough room. And so things like that, like big wide open spaces, the Halifax Common and the public gardens, I really enjoy. Another one is the Halifax Library on Spring Garden. It truly is, as far as I'm concerned, the most accessible building in this city. It's 5 huge floors, 3 elevators to get you up and down stairs. And if I'm counting correctly, they have 15 accessible washrooms, 3 on each floor. I've never seen that before. So it's a fairly new building. It was being built when I moved here 5.5 years ago. So it really should be very accessible, but it really is the most accessible building I've ever been in. So I'm not much of a reader myself, but they do have computers. There's 2 coffee shops, one on the main floor, one on the top floor. In the summer, it's a great view. So if you're looking for a great date idea and you've got accessibility issues, I would check out the library. Great view at the top floor. If you're a reader, it's a great thing as well. They have special nights throughout the week. They have trivia nights. I went to a Simpsons trivia with a good friend of mine a couple of years ago. We're both big Simpsons fans. I've been watching it since it started in 1989. And so is he. But we got our asses kicked. We really did. There was a lot of obscure questions, but it was a great night. So definitely check it out. I also went to the Boardroom Cafe on Barrington Street not that long ago. Again, it was a trivia night. It was a wrestling trivia night. Went with one of my coworkers. There is a way in for those with accessibility issues and those who use wheelchairs. It's a bit of a roundabout way. You have to go down a few different hallways, and there's an elevator. But there's a buzzer at the door, and then someone who works there will meet you at the door and guide you to the way you need to go to get in. So I thought that was great as well. We only went for the trivia, but they have pretty much, from what I could tell, every game you can think of. So if you're a gamer, if you enjoy board games, card games, things like Risk and D&D, whatever you're into, they have so many options. Had a really great time there as well. So if you have accessibility issues or you're a wheelchair user, it's another great date idea as well. I also really enjoy going to the Discovery Center. I really enjoy it. It sounds like I'm on a dating show here. Seriously, though, I've been to the Discovery Center since they moved to the waterfront quite a few times, and they have special adult events every few months as well. There's one over Halloween, which is an absolute blast because everybody comes dressed up. This past October I went, and it was also the same weekend as HalCon. So it was very quiet at first, which I couldn't quite understand because I've gone in past years, and there's been a huge lineup. It takes about 20 minutes to get in, and this year I went and got in pretty much right away. But HalCon was still going, and about an hour or two in, everybody who would normally be there, well, they all showed up. And the costumes were absolutely immaculate. So, I mean, it's always a really great night. They usually have one over Valentines Day, and there's also one in the spring. And I believe there's usually one over the summer as well. But very accessible, and it's, I think, 5 floors, massive elevators, huge washrooms, but a really great night as well if you're looking for a night out, or just during the day. I'm not a huge fan of going during the day, especially on the weekends, just because there's usually a lot of people there, so there's big lineups to the exhibits. But these adult-only events is a really great night if you're looking for something to do with somebody. Kind of a funny story. The last time I was at the Discovery Center, it was for their Halloween event, and they had a few booths set up for different things, and one of them you got the chance to eat bugs. They had crickets and mealworms and a few others, and I got there, and I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of bugs. I'm terrified of spiders, but I was also peckish. So I went up to the table, and I figured, they had the mealworm set up on a little tin, and thought, well, okay, I'll try some just to say I've done it. So I grabbed a little container and had some seasoning you could put in there, like garlic and dill and things like that. It was basically like they were popcorn. So I put in a few seasoning, and I threw them back and chewed them. And they weren't bad. I mean, they tasted like Triscuits. Nothing special, really. Not a lot of flavor. And just as I swallowed them, the person I was with looked at the sign on the table and pointed out that, if you have a shellfish allergy, you shouldn't be eating these. Guess who's allergic to shellfish? Now, I was fine. I waited it out for a couple minutes and no reaction whatsoever. The guy working there behind the table was absolutely terrified that he just killed somebody. I felt really bad for him, but like I said, we waited for a while. I was okay, and I probably shouldn't have gone back for seconds, but it is what it is. And, of course, there's always the movie theater. The movie theater is also very accessible. I go to the one here on Spring Garden, the Park Lane Mall, Cineplex. Well, it's not the Cineplex anymore. They were bought out, but love movies, always have. Back home, I used to go, I swear, at least once a week. Been a little busier, since moving here, but so I don't go as much as I used to. But I wouldn't say movies are a great idea for a first date just because you can't talk to each other. But absolutely, if you are looking for a great date idea, movie theater, definitely, especially if you're into movies, a great idea as well. For those of you who do follow me on YouTube, I have my own web series. Haven't really been doing much in the last couple of months just because of the weather. I like to do it outside, and it is a little more difficult with the snow on the ground. But this past summer, I started a series called Everybody Pees. And the reason I called it that was somebody messaged me on Twitter one day and explained that their wife is a wheelchair user, and she's always wanted to go down to the Halifax waterfront. But she was a little apprehensive because she doesn't know where all the accessible washrooms are. So I went down there with my camera one day, and I filmed from one end to the other on the Halifax waterfront and showcased where all the accessible washrooms were. So just to kind of help not only them, but everybody, because not everybody knows where to look. Especially if it's a first date, if you want to invite somebody out somewhere, well, you need to know, can I get in here? Can I use the washroom? Even something like, can I wash my hands? Because Purell only goes so far. What if you're about to eat? And not to mention, a building could look accessible from the outside, but, well, you open a door and all of a sudden you're looking at a 30-step stairwell going all the way down to the basement. I found that especially true when I lived in BC. Anytime I went to Victoria, I remember a good friend of mine, my best friend Rob, and I took a trip one weekend, spent the whole weekend there, and we wanted to go clubbing one night. We were quite a bit younger, and I think we found maybe one or two clubs we could actually get into. We actually Googled it one day because we were fairly new to the city of where all the clubs and bars were, and I don't know how many times we'd finally find one, open up a door, and we were just staring at a stairwell. You wouldn't know it from the outside, but, well, you open up the door, and there it is. So I'll be doing that in the coming months, going to certain areas in the HRM, especially where it's very well populated. Dartmouth Crossing comes to mind, Bears Lake, and that one should be fun. But there and a few others where I'll be showcasing not only where the accessible washrooms are, but just buildings that are actually accessible, where people with accessibility issues or wheelchair users can actually enter the building. Just thinking back to, I mentioned the movies earlier, did anyone watch the Oscars on the weekend? I recorded them that night, living on the East Coast. They don't end till about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'm not a young man anymore. I can't stay awake that late. So I recorded them, watched them a few days later, and they were pretty decent. I had only seen The Joker, the only movie I had seen that was nominated for Best Picture. I really enjoyed it, by the way, but hadn't seen any of the other movies, so I wasn't really sure how to gauge what was going to win. I'm glad Parasite won. I've heard it's amazing. I can't wait to check that out. But I think the Oscars had slipped into my subconscious because I've been talking about it all week to different people, coworkers and friends and whatnot. And the night before, I had a dream where I won an Oscar. Not sure what for, but I won. They called my name. And, well, there was no ramp to get onto the stage, so that was strike number 1. I had to go through backstage, and so that was fine. I get onto the stage, and they give me my award, and I roll up to the microphone. And I thank the usual people, my family, my parents, my friends, and my agent, and all that good stuff. And then I practically take the award and throw it on the ground. And then I continue to berate everyone in the Academy and everyone in the crowd for waiting until 2020 to give an Oscar to someone in a wheelchair. Absolutely lost it. The F-bombs were flying and my arms were waving, and I absolutely lost it on thousands of people. I was calling out people by name, and I woke up laughing. I thought it was great. One of my friends told me, "Well, you're just an ungrateful son of a bitch, aren't you?" I won't be winning any awards anytime soon. Of course, there have been actors over the years with the accessibility issues that have won awards. Harold Russell comes to mind. Google him. It's a really great story. It was back in the 40s, and years later, he actually got in trouble for selling his award. His wife had some health concerns, and he needed the money, and apparently you're not allowed to do that. So they've actually changed the rules since then, and you're no longer allowed to sell your award. You have to give it back to the Academy if, for whatever reason, you no longer want it. But yeah, Google Harold Russell, a really great story. A man who had a disability and won an Academy Award back in the 40s. Really cool story. I wasn't aware of that one until I had tweeted about my dream, and people jumped on it and told me about all these other people who won awards, those with disabilities. But that one especially really stuck with me. So with it being Valentine's Day, I've got to tell this story. This goes back probably about 7 or 8 years now. Back when I was living on the West Coast, I was dating this girl, and it was Valentine's Day, and we went out for a date. We went out to a movie. And we were in line for the movie. We were a little early. The lineup was quite long. I think it might have been cheap night. And so we're sitting there in line, and, well, I had to fart. And those who are wheelchair users know that when you're sitting down, it can be very difficult to let one go, especially without someone noticing. So I'm sitting there, and it's building. I'm like, okay, I don't want to force it because I want it to be just a fart. And so I try to do the cheek and sneak just ever so casually. Figure if I let it out slowly, nobody knows. So I lift my right leg as slowly as I can, and I swear it was the loudest fart I've ever made. Everybody in line heard it. They all turned and looked at me. And at that point I thought, okay, I have 3 options. I can deny. I can blame it on my date, but if I do that, there probably won't be a second one. Or the third option, this is what I did. I put my arms in the air, and with a big smile on my face, I blurted out, "Happy Valentine's Day." Kind of diffused the problem. Everybody kind of chuckled. But so if this ever happens to you, if you're out on a date and you've got to let one go, or if it just sneaks out, because let's face it, that happens, just blurt out "Happy Valentine's Day." Even if it's not Valentine's Day, because I guarantee you it will definitely help. So those are just a few ideas of what to do, not just on Valentine's Day, but if you just want to go on a date and you have accessibility concerns, if you have a disability. And I hope everyone has a great Valentine's Day. Currently looking outside, and it looks very cold out there. I just found out that it's supposed to be minus 26 with the wind chill this evening. So guess who's staying inside for the next 4 days? And definitely not looking forward to that. So good luck, everybody, if you have to venture outside. It's supposed to be very, very cold. I just got a notification that my podcast is now officially on Spotify. So if you have Spotify, check that out. Sitting Down with Brian George. And I just looked. It is there. So that's another option for listening to Sitting Down with Brian George if you have Spotify. That's going to be my show for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening again. Had another great time chatting with everybody. I'll be back in 2 weeks. So remember, you can listen to Sitting Down with Brian George on Spreaker.com, SoundCloud, Facebook, Sitting Down with Brian George, Spotify, or follow me on Twitter at Halifax Ninja or at Sittin' Down Pod, SITTIN Down Pod. Thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Have a great family day on Monday. And always remember to stand for something, even if you can't stand. See you next time.